Hello everyone, today is Friday, December the 3rd, 2021, and I'm in day one of my 14-day self-quarantine. I'm conducting a bit of an experiment where yesterday I visited a, um, a quarantined household. That been the members of the household had symptoms for a few days. I think it's been about 3 days now. One of them's in hospital, and basically I've administered myself to self quarantine because I don't want to involve anyone else in this experiment that I'm doing. And so basically, I'm just self isolating and won't have any human contact for the next couple of weeks. But basically, I visited this household and shook hands with the people in the household. Was in confined rooms with sneezing and coughing going on. Didn't even ask to be if they would happy to be filmed, and they declined to do that. I said I'd like to be filmed, even if you spit in my mouth, just to see what would happen if to prove transmission. If it is possible, and all these sorts of things. And the reason why I'm doing this is just basically where my life is currently at in the moment. I'm 45 years old. My health is haven't had any health, never been sick in the last 20 years. But prior to that, I did used to be quite chronically sick. I did have quite a big hypochondriac type of attitude. Still have a little bit of it. I did have a bit of a germphobe attitude. Still don't really have that much of that. And but yeah, pretty much from a young age till 26 years old, I had chronic sore throats, and I was pretty much sick within every 2 weeks. And yeah, one day I went to work and I was extremely sick, probably one of the sickest days of my life. When I was 26 I was at a factory, and there was just something deep inside me that wanted to sort of overcome this sickness once and for all. That probably saw within myself that maybe a little bit of it's self-created. Later on in life, I sort of learnt about psychosomatic illnesses that most people, pretty much like 99% of ailments and illnesses that people have is based on a state of mind. What you believe is what you become. And probably a little bit of me knew about that back at 26, even though I hadn't done any sort of studies on this topic. But yeah, and on this day when I was 26 years old, I was coughing out lots and lots of phlegm, golf ball sized phlegms, and I just sort of persisted and sort of soldiered on, and I didn't go home to be sick, and I stayed in work, and it was the first time I've ever done something like that, and I wanted to see what would happen, and pretty much I drank lots of water that day, and I really felt there was a big shift within me with my attitude. I felt like I overcame that program of sickness that I feel that most people have since birth. And that's just things that I've studied, that a lot of these elements come from concreted within us since the age of 7 years old. So if there's any illnesses that someone has at a young age, and there's quite a strong reaction and a pattern that has happened at that young age, that pretty much sets the boundary for the rest of your life. And I feel that on that day when I was 26 years old, I overcame my lifelong boundaries and self-limitations. And since then, I never became sick ever again. Since then, I've studied a little bit more and, learned about Anthony Robbins stuff with alkaline and acid, and I guess, drinking good water for the last many years, even pretty much, couple of decades now of drinking really good water, and also having a good attitude. And another experience I had also that defines sort of my decisions which I make today is when I was 20 years old. I come from a background with a very big ego. I have a lot of self beat up patterns within me. Self-annihilation, self-destruction behaviours, self-addiction behaviours. And this is something I've worked on my whole life to try to address. And one of my big things, obviously, if you've seen my YouTube videos, I do a lot of mindfulness videos, and several years ago I did actually experience enlightenment for 1.5 days, and that's attitude, using mindfulness to undo these negative patterns that we've learned, has seemed to benefit me greatly. But before I learned all of this, at the age of around 28, I started learning all this, mainly through Eckhart Tolle stuff. I had an experience at 20 years old where my ego was just cultivating negative thinking. I was in this room in a rental property where I was sharing accommodation with someone. It was a dark room. I just had a mattress on the floor. I had no furniture. I had a job that was a commission job that wasn't paying good money. I was struggling to pay the rent, struggling to eat food. When I asked my roommate once if I could have his bread rolls that were in the back of his car that he wasn't eating. And it was just the best meal of my life, having these 6 fresh bread rolls, because I didn't have any money for food. And but during that time, that night, there was one night where I'm just looking at, it was an absolutely freezing cold night, and I was looking at the moonlight through the window with no curtains, and thinking, my ego was cultivating all these negative thinking, and it was so powerful and negative thinking that my body just had to clean the acid that was producing. So it generated hyperventilation, and this lasted for about 90 minutes or something. I couldn't stop it, and my neighbour was kind enough. My roommate was kind enough to take me for a drive in the freezing cold night, and he told me to wind the windows down, even though I was freezing with a t-shirt on, and probably I had a jumper on as well, and but I was absolutely freezing, and we just drove for about an hour until my hyperventilation went down. But during that moment while I was driving, there was a peace pretty much arose within me. Even before that, pretty much in the moment, that in the first few seconds that it happened, is that that was my first sort of awakening, where I realised that it was my identification with negative thinking that created this body response. So that was a huge moment in my life where, I saw the correlation between thinking and, most importantly, identification with this thinking and identification with this character, this self-loathing, self-destructive, self-misery character. And if you identify with that, then it becomes your reality. So I had a wake-up call that day when I was 20 years old, and there's just been many moments throughout my life that's affected the way I am today, and brought me to this decision of doing this experiment. So the household I visited, I've known the people for many years, and having insight into my own hypochondriacism and my own germphobism, I could very easily see the people that I knew for many years in this household that was in quarantine yesterday, that's probably caused to the effects of their attitude. I had lengthy discussions for a couple of hours with the people, and wasn't trying to probe, wasn't trying to sort of change or manipulate their attitude. I just questioned them and probed them in a way to get their insights, and it was very clear from my conversations that the insights were greatly generated and governed by their state of attitude, on their state of attitude about germs and belief in all sorts of things. So I just believe that through this experiment, I like to see what would happen with someone who doesn't have all these elements, who's pretty much mostly overcame these elements, and whether there might even be such a thing as transmission. That's the other thing. I'm open-minded. I have done a lot of research, and there could be a person-made device that's been created, and yes, it could be the effects of this is true, as apparent in these people that are in quarantine that I visited yesterday. But I'd like to see what will happen, if having a naturalist attitude that believes in your own immunity and the robustness, the unbelievable robustness of humans, and their that they can swim in sewage. There's people in third world countries that I remember seeing a documentary, kids swimming in sewage to see if they can find a gold chain that was flushed down the toilet, and they're perfectly healthy. There's people who visit third world countries and they drink the water and they get sick, where the people who live there have been drinking the water and they're fine, they're absolutely healthy. They don't have all the resources that we have in this sort of country like of Australia, and their health is fantastic. So these are a lot of the things that have sculpted and shaped the way I am today and what I believe in. But mostly the irrefutable evidence that I live, which is beyond beliefs. It's not a belief system. It's just factual reality. There is such a thing as psychosomatic behaviour, and many people can contest, pretty much everyone, that their attitude somewhat determines their state of physical health. You don't have to be, it only takes someone who's 20 years old, 30 years old, and generally mostly the more older you get, you realise that your state of attitude does overcome it. And another story I had recently is, I visited someone that had cancer in hospital, and they had a hugely, hypochondriac behaviour, and as expected, their first question to the doctor was, "Doctor, how long have I got to live?" And I was very intrigued to see the doctor's response, and he paused for a moment, the doctor, and he said, instead of focusing on sickness, let's focus on health. And he had a really good attitude about him, and he really changed the person's attitude that had the cancer, and they've pretty much come out of it now. It's been probably about 3-4 months now, or even longer, I don't know now, I think it's been, but they're pretty much cleared of all cancer. They had bowel cancer, so it was operated on. They couldn't go to the toilet, so there was chopped out a tumour out of their stomach, and now they can go to the toilet, and they checked up a little bit of other things, and they did chemo treatment, and that's it. So, but for me, my lifestyle has been mostly a naturalist. I've only taken Panadol a couple of times in my life, only because I didn't know any better. And my medical history, you could pretty much sum it down to, in woodwork class in year 11, I had a splinter in my eye, and I saw a doctor to see if he could find the splinter. He didn't find any splinter, and it went out. After a while, the sensation in my eye the next day disappeared. But I found through mindfulness that I've been able to pretty much overcome a lot of things that I could have easily gone to a doctor over. Very easily, quickly ran to the doctor over. Little stomach elements or whatever. And pretty much within several minutes of just sort of bringing my attention to it and smiling at it and holding a good vibration and state of attitude, I have evidence that I've been able to pretty much transcend any body element. I've had even pretty other serious things where I've had sort of, I forget the name of it, where you're sort of disorientated. It's almost like in the eardrum where there's some people might have an infection in the eardrum and it causes disorientation. But I felt I had that just through my, when you do mindfulness, it's said that you will experience elements pop up. You'll get body pains, you'll get all sorts of things. You might get dizziness, all sorts of things. And this is expected when you do mindfulness and you're undoing these psychosomatic patterns. It's almost like a bit of a sort of knee-jerk reaction by the mind, and that's something what I've learnt in Scientology. Not that I'm a Scientology member, but when about 15 years ago when I looked into Scientology, that's something they believe in as well. Psychosomatic illnesses, they believe that pretty much 99% of illnesses are psychosomatic, body elements, and obviously when people get sick, it's another story I had. When I was probably about 28, I had a boss, and every time he'll sneeze, he'll say, "Oh, I'm going to get a cold now tomorrow." But then I said to him, "Come on, man, that's just your attitude. Like you've been repeating this pattern probably, and I confirmed with him it was true that it was for many years this has been happening, probably since childhood." And I said, "This is like a pattern." I explained to him, and I said, "Just drink some water, have a good attitude, and see if you can transcend it that way." And it didn't work for him. He was convinced that pattern, there was no such thing as a pattern, that this is true, that when he sneezes, the next day he'll be sick for many, many days. And so it became as he believed, and so he was not open to any other suggestions. It became his reality, and he was very sick for the next few days at work. While he was the boss of the business, and I used to work as a car detailer for him in South Melbourne. And but I've seen many people like this in my life, and we're all teachers to each other. But for me, I've come from one side of the extreme to the other. I came from someone that was a very big hypochondriac, a somewhat germphobe, had cultivating beliefs that manifested my health, particular state of health, and I'm a big believer in your state of mind manifests your state of health. Whatever it is believed on the inside will be produced on the outside. And some people may not believe that yet, but maybe in a few years' time that may become self-evident and true for them too. Nothing's ever true for you until you experience it rather than believe it. Beliefs will only take you so far. At the end of the day, seeing is believing. Is really that you need to experience it first, which is more powerful than any belief. And then later for me the belief comes after I experience it rather than prior to the experience. So for me that's just where I've gone, and everyone's different. Some people aren't open to that suggestion, and that's where they'll stay, and they'll just keep manifesting, that. And people will just say, oh, that's just my genetics and just my family background. That's why I get sick, and there's nothing I can do about it. And I need petropharmaceutical chemicals for the rest of my life to control it, But I've, pretty much since a young age been a bit of a naturalist. And so, yeah, it's first day. So pretty much last night I made contact. I asked if I could, like I said, I could be spat at in the mouth or have a spat dripped in my mouth, and they declined. And I asked if I could lick their door handle. They could decline, but I think I made reasonable contact. Shook hands and hugged them, and was in the vicinity while they're coughing and sneezing, and stayed there for a good couple of hours, and touched surfaces and had drinks from their glasses, and and the whole household was in quarantine and so-called contaminated. So just want to see the reaction from me, whether it makes a difference, whether it is true that someone's state of mind is immune to it, And we'll see. Maybe I might even do a little bit of a COVID test. I have someone that has a mobile test that you can do yourself. But yeah, but I am going to self-isolate. This is my journey and my experiment, and I take full responsibility for it. And I'll do it just for myself only. I'm not going to involve anyone else, and I'm not going to be in the vicinity of anyone else. This is just my thing that I want to do, and yeah, and another story I guess is I probably had a witch once that probably tried to point the bone at me, and it happened at a young age. Probably I was around mid-20s, and but I had enough insight within me at the time to look through it. It's like a Jedi mind trick. She said to me something that would cultivate a reaction, and I just saw that was her viewpoint and that was her intention to do that, and I forgave her for it, and as a result it had no effect. It's like in the Return of the Jedi, he says, your Jedi mind trick doesn't work on me. And that's sort of something that's also affected my attitude, watching movies like that talk about this sort of attitude, and that so you think of, so you become of. There's unlimited quotes you can quote through history of people that talk about this, and and I've also got many other stories like I've just pushed myself to the limits. When I was in my probably around 30 years old, I did things that said couldn't be done because there was within me something that wanted to prove that it can be done. I've mentioned this in a previous YouTube video that I made, where I was in a car yard. I had a contract I took over a contract to rinse and dry 400 cars that night. You start at about midnight and you finish at about 8 in the morning. It was a BMW Kingsway in South Melbourne, and my boss didn't want to get up early in the morning. They used to get up at about 6 in the morning and in the freezing cold weather with about 6 of the workers, and they would all get a hose and chamois all the cars down and clean the dust off them every day. He didn't want to do that, so he gave me the contract. And at the time he gave me a little bit of money. It was a little bit above a normal daily wage, and he said to me, I hope you employ people, but there really wasn't enough money to employ people, so I had to do it myself. So I took on 400 cars by myself, which was normally done by 6 people, and throughout the culture within Melbourne at the time, that was the normal thing to do. You get a gang of people to do it. Very rarely you'll see, unless it's a small car yard, you'll get a single person. So anyway, I did this 400 cars, and by 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm starting to finish, and again, this negative attitude came back. And I was in such a deep state of negativity, thinking, look at it, it's too big, I can't even see the end of the yard. And I started to cultivate sickness, and I wasn't aware of it yet, so this is why I was doing it. And my body went in, had diarrhea, so I actually shit my pants a little bit in the yard at 8 o'clock in the morning. My boss came, I was embarrassed, I had to sort of hide myself so he didn't see my diarrhea. And but that day I went home, and then I realised this is just again the same thing happening, it's the attitude. So then I meditated when I got home, and I realised, what am I doing? Actually, this is the chamois, funny enough. This is the chamois I used to do the cars. It's actually two. I custom made them. I got my mum to sew them. It's an industrial size. This chamois has done thousands of cars. It's probably done maybe a good 300,000 cars. That's why it's worn out. But it's two chamois sewn together, and it's pre-abrased to make these little nodules on them. So I pre-abrased it with a wire brush put on the drill bit, and I upholstered this to a chipboard. So I had to make my own custom chamois. And I put it through a ringer, and from 8 hours, from midnight to 8 AM. Yeah, but basically the attitude changed. So I realised, what am I doing? I'm chamoising one panel at a time. How hard's that? And then my state, from probably within 7 days, I would have cultivated death. And I'm not joking about that. That's how negative the state was. My health deteriorated within the last few hours of that 8-hour shift, to the point where I was metastasizing sickness, diarrhea. And then within the next few days, I changed my attitude. And I went from a state of deep loathing and unacceptance to acceptance, to even enjoyment. And then after about a week or so, to prove the point further, I added 3 more car yards over the next few months to it. So I went from 400 cars. I added Mercedes-Benz Melbourne, which is up the road, which had about 250 or 300 cars on it. And then I did Mercedes-Benz in the airport. So I used to get up in the freezing cold. The cars were so cold that the chamois would stick to the roof at the airport, and would also stick to the cars on BMW as well. I had a bit of cold spot there. So, and I also added Lindsay Fox's car yard. Mercedes-Benz used to mix me with Lindsay Fox. I was going to be his personal detailer at one stage. And I did his car yard at Brighton at the time, which is Audi Brighton, which is now gone. And so in the end, I did 700 cars a day by myself, and it became a folk story almost. Like, people many years later were saying, "Did you know this guy that used to clean all these cars?" And I go, "Yeah, I think I know that guy." You know, but and then it even changed the society's opinion about what's possible and not possible. I realised just in Melbourne, where they started getting one person to do it. Later, after 7 years, I left the contract. And they got one person to do Mercedes-Benz Melbourne. Not sure about BMW Melbourne. And but that's just another huge example where I've proven to myself I've overcome state of minds, and I've transcended to the next level. And that's what I believe life's about. We're not here to be slaves to our egoic mind and its limitations. We're here to maybe look at our ego. And sometimes we're lucky, it becomes natural. Sometimes we just have an epiphany moment, and it becomes very apparent that we've been cultivating this state of health our whole life, and we never saw it. And all of a sudden something happens in our life where it becomes apparent. And contrast appears between us and our ego, and we can see the self-cultivating patterns of our ego. So, but that was a big thing, that car contract. I did it for 7 years, and I had 4 holidays a year. I had Christmas, Easter, Anzac Day, and whatever else day it was. I didn't take a holiday for 7 years because it was my own business. And then after 7 years, I got into detailing. I became one of the world's best detailers in the world, in car polishing and all that sort of stuff. So, but that's what's given. You know, I believe that our ego definitely governs our behaviour. It creates our perceptions, and if we identify with our ego, then we also identify with its perceptions, and its perceptions become our reality. And that's why for the last, I don't know how many, 10, 15 years, I've been making YouTubes talking about this in my Coffee Cup Enlightenment videos, which is where you're watching this right now. Yeah, you've been watching what I feel is one of the most important things to learn in life, which is to learn to transcend our ego and live a peaceful and happy life, an effortless life. And who knows, maybe an enlightened life, which I did live for 1.5 days. You know, my current state now, I do have an ego, but my ego is pretty much 99.9% under awareness. You know, if my ego still erupts here and there and cracks up here and there, but I don't believe in it anymore, even while it's happening, and I can laugh at it, you know, instantly after it's happened, when my awareness kicks back in again. So that's the difference mindfulness has made on my life. It's I'm not completely ego free. I still have an ego like everyone else, but what's the difference is I don't believe in it anymore, and I'm able to detect it. And there's only just now within me a subtle egoic thing in the background, which was different to what I experienced several years ago in the full enlightenment state when there was no ego whatsoever. I woke up one morning at 6 in the morning, and there was the complete absence of ego. It disappeared in an instant, and so too with it disappeared 1,000,000 kilograms of heaviness within me disappeared. It was like bliss, you know, for 1.5 days. And then after 1.5 days, I woke up the next day, still it was there, the enlightenment. There was no more monkey mind chatter. There was complete silence. And then at lunchtime the next day, that heaviness and the monkey mind chatter returned. And brings me to the state that I am right now. Whether enlightenment will happen one day again, who knows? But for now, I just accept that I am where I am now. I'm aware of my own ego. I'm very motivated and interested to address my ego. I'm self-honest about my ego. I'm happy to admit my ego to people, even amidst the argument, and then say thank you for that opinion. And I'm happy to address my ego. You know. So, you know, and whereas if my ego back then would go into defense mechanism and counter argument mechanism, you know, it does it occasionally, but generally not really that. Sometimes I may actually speak in a way, my tone of voice may increase in an argumentative tone, but I'm just stating the facts, what I feel is right in the situation. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm being a narcissistic, using narcissistic egoic behaviour to try to defend the illusion of egotism. You know, I'm interested in dissolving my ego. So whatever it is that pops up in me, I'm happy to address it. And if someone brings up something, I'll say yes, that's true. Or if they bring up something and it's their own ego projecting onto mine and it's got nothing to do with me, I'll say the facts to them. And if that causes their narcissistic ego to argue, then good luck to them, you know. I can happy to bring it up to them, and it's up to them if they want to see it, you know. But we're all on our own journey.